Hello, my name is Kathleen Dowling, and I'm here today to interview Dan Coughlin, who's the chair of the Town of Duxbury Affordable Housing Trust. And we are doing this interview as part of the Duxbury Senior Center Age and Dementia Friendly Project. And so first of all, here is Dan Coughlin with me. Dan, you are the chair of the Affordable Housing Trust in Duxbury. Can you talk a little bit about how you got involved with that?
Sure, Kathy. Well, first of all, thank you for taking the time to interview me and to help us spread the word about what we're doing with the Housing Trust. I got involved in the trust about 4 years ago when a friend of mine who had been a member of the trust found the need to resign because of personal reasons, and he thought I might be a good, candidate to replace him, given my 40-year history in the commercial real estate and investment real estate business. So he thought that I had something to offer there, and I hope I have. So it's been a great experience.
And talk a little bit about how the trust was formed in the past.
Yeah, the trust was actually formed out of two pre-existing town government groups. One was the Housing Partnership, and the other was a pre-existing Duxbury Housing Authority, Housing Affordable Trust, excuse me. And the two of them were merged through a couple of different town meeting articles for the purpose of trying to streamline a little bit the acquisition of housing, acquisition of land for housing within the town. So it's actually a creature of the state government where a number of towns and cities have their own affordable housing trusts, who work within the confines of those jurisdictions.
Thank you. Thank you. And how is your work different from other organizations, for instance, the Duxbury Housing Authority?
Sure, yeah. There's a lot of organizations and committees and boards in town that deal with housing. For instance, the Community Preservation Committee has a housing component. The Housing Trust is one, as well as the Housing Authority, but we also have the Zoning Board and the Planning Board. Now, the Zoning Board, Planning Board, and CPC have a lot of responsibilities beyond just housing, and they deal with a number of different issues throughout the town. The Housing Authority and the Housing Trust are the only groups that are exclusively focused on housing. So that's how we differ from those other parts of the government structure.
And specifically, how is your work different from the Duxbury Housing Authority?
Sure. The Housing Authority's mission is to provide housing for very low-income individuals. It's a rental housing program, and it's also a program that's expected to help people transition into more permanent housing at some point in time. So it's really transitory. It's not a permanent facility. The Housing Authority, Housing Trust, on the other hand, deals with people who have low income and moderate income, income below the average median income in town. And it's permanent housing. And so we have a permanent facility for people in that lower to moderate income level. So
a survey that the Senior Center took on about a year and a half ago with the help of the Old Colony Planning Council surveyed almost between 1,400 and 1,500 residents in Duxbury. Wow. And one of the we learned a lot about housing and a lot about housing needs in the town. We certainly identified that there are certain cohorts in the town and quite a few needs. Quite honestly, I can get really lost in the acronyms and all of the data that's swimming around. And so I'm just wondering if we could spend some time on some very tangible ideas. For instance, what is affordable housing?
Well, affordable housing is actually a term of art defined by the Housing and Urban Development. And it's actually, let me cite it here, it refers to housing targeted to and providing affordable housing for households with an income at or below the average median income. Now, the average median income, or AMI, is again a term of art, and that's defined by the Housing and Urban Development based on surveys they conduct of household incomes in various towns. And as an example, the average median income for a family of four in Duxbury as of the 2020 census was $163,000. So that's the AMI we at the Affordable Housing Trust are focused on people providing housing for people whose income is below that level. So 163,000 is the affordable median income, and that's our focus.
So it differs from town to town.
Well, the number differs, but
That's
the
right,
function
yeah.
doesn't differ.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think you've just explained how it differs from low income housing.
Right.
And how big a gap is there between the need and the available housing in Duxbury?
Well, as you can imagine, the gap is large, and it's getting larger all the time. We have a housing production plan that's produced every 5 years, and we're in the process of finalizing the 2024 version of that. And this particular issue has been researched and defined within that housing production plan. And in simple terms, economists would generally think that a family can afford a home that's priced at 2 to 3 times their average income. So if you're making $200,000, you can afford a $400,000 house. Now, in Duxbury, $163,000 income would get you a house in the $330,000 range. Well, the average house sold last year in the town of Duxbury was $1 million. So you can see that there's a wide gap between what people can afford and what are actually being sold in the marketplace. There's another term, again in the housing production plan, it's called an affordability gap. And in that particular instance, take a family of 4 that would typically live in a home with 3 bedrooms. That home last year sold for $888,000. Now that family of 4 that we just said has an income of around $163,000 can afford a $350,000 house. 888 less 350 is your affordability gap. It's over $500,000. So, people in town are being priced out of the available inventory.
Right, right. Can we swerve a little bit and talk about the production plan, because that has so much information in it, especially and we could talk so much about it, but the inventory, for instance. How did you go about discerning what the inventory was in town?
Well, the inventory is very difficult to get your hands around. Obviously, it's a question of how many houses there are in town, what size those houses are, what the area is within those houses, what the age of those houses. As you can see from the housing production plans, a number of different ways of defining that and determining that. The inventory is not the bigger question. The bigger question for us is really who the cohorts are of people that we could attract into these homes. And most people will, quickly identify the fact that we have an increasingly elderly population, many of whom live in big houses they've lived in for many years and would like to sell and would like to move to something smaller, and stay close to their family. Yet there's no place for them to go. And we also have determined that there's a need for housing for veterans. There's a need for housing for people with disabilities, whether it be autism or other disabilities. And lastly, we've even talked about the fact that there's a need for housing for our children who want to move back to town after they've gotten out of college or started their career, and they want to move back into Duxbury. They can't afford a $1 million house, And so there's all these needs that are out there, very hard to define because you can't get your hands around how many people walk into a Sotheby's office and walk out saying, "I just can't afford to ask a question here." So it's a very difficult, difficult question. But clearly, anecdotal evidence has shown us that there are those cohorts that are out there with sizable numbers.
Yes, and that's exactly one of the projects that the Housing Domain Committee has taken on, trying to get our arms around the different cohorts.
Right.
And not so much going after anecdotal data, but trying to have people tell us their stories, because we've learned a great deal that was really probably invisible to a number of us on the committee. For instance, that a lot of people are managing their money, even if they're in too large a house. But all of a sudden, there's a tree falls down, or a couple of trees fall down in the yard, or the roof needs to be replaced, and all of a sudden, that becomes a financial crisis for them, and really kind of instigating a move out of the house, maybe even sooner than they had wanted to do that. So, tell me about funding. Is there funding available for the trust, or is there funding available that you kind of navigate for people?
Yeah, it's interesting. There are a lot of different funding sources. First of all, the trust has its own capital, and the trust capital is not in the town's. It's managed by the town, but it is not considered a town resource. And so, for instance, if the trust spends money to buy a piece of land, we're not spending taxpayer money. This is money that probably came perhaps from the CPC, or it could have come from a federal program. It could have come from profits on certain properties that we sold in the past.
Okay.
So there are lots of different ways the money can get there. But the bigger issue is what we do with it. And our role is not to buy houses and to own them, or to build houses and own them. It's not to build houses at all. Our role is really to acquire land that can then be, through the RFP process, bought by a developer who can build affordable housing to help increase the subsidized housing inventory. So we are really kind of a financial manager or a land conduit, trying to bring the land from its raw state through to the developed state. But we're not the developers. A lot of people think we're developers. A lot of people call up and say, I had a call the other day, how many houses do you have that are vacant that we can rent? So we don't have any houses. And even if we did, affordable housing in this town would not be vacant.
Right. But do people contact you to give you that information ever?
They contact us to ask the question.
Yes.
Again, it's the perception that we are something other than a bank, if you will, or a land manager. Our goal is to acquire more land. It's to find property in town, and that's frankly one of the big challenges. With the zoning that we have in town and the price of land in town. Raw land in Duxbury is selling for $500,000 an acre. We have 1 acre zoning, so that means right there, the average person in town can't afford to put a tent up, on that vacant land.
I also know from reading a lot of the literature that the trust has very clear goals. Can you talk a little bit about the goals that you have had in the more recent past, and what you've accomplished?
Yeah, we've had a number of different things we've done in the last few years. We've had property on Franklin Street that was in disrepair that we bought, renovated, and then sold to a low-income situation. We had Feinberg Bog, where we brought in an RFP and had that converted with Habitat for Humanity, providing the resources there. One of the more recent, what I'll call wins, is on Lincoln Street in the 400 block Checkerberry development, Checkerberry Crossings, developed by Champion Builders, where the trust owned land, sold it to Checkerberry. They've built 20 houses, 10 of which are market rate, 5 of which are moderately priced, and 5 of which are low income, or affordable, as we might call it. And it's a wonderful neighborhood. It's a great little project. We'd love to do more of those. In fact, we've got other land that we would consider doing those kind of things on. And we have a piece of land on East Street, 39 acres, most of which is a bog, but some of the uplands would potentially accommodate development in the maybe 8 to 10 unit range. We have another piece on Laurel Street, Laurel and Temple, that we're looking at the opportunity to build some elderly housing on. So we've got lots of different options. We're exploring that. And we have another piece of land that we have in our sites where we're thinking about an autism house. So, again, the biggest problem for us is finding the land.
Right, right. So what about cottage housing? There's such interest, and certainly that's one of the areas that the Housing Domain Committee has spent some time researching. And really getting pretty excited about, because it just checks a lot of boxes. Where are we with that? I know that I read somewhere that you were interested in the the Laurel Street project
Right,
perhaps
right.
becoming that. But
Yep.
how do you decide to do one or the other?
Well, some of the guiding influences for us, when we've acquired a piece of land and we're putting together the RFP to be sent out to developers and registered on the Commonwealth's registry, there are a couple things that are kind of, sacrosanct for us. One is that we want any project to fit in Duxbury. We want it to be part of what the town looks like, the town feel. And we've been very lucky. I mean, Checkerberry, again, a good instance of being able to do that. So that cottage style feel and approach, is something we put into the RFP. We don't want, just cinder blocks. We want something that looks and feels like Duxbury. We also want things that fit in the neighborhood in terms of size. We don't want to build a 90 or 100 unit complex, not that there's even land to accommodate that, although there might be under certain circumstances. But that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to have some things that fit within the town. And so the cottage style and the property that we're looking at for thinking about in terms of elderly is in fact a cottage style development done by a group down in Nantucket. So I think again that the kind of look and feel of things that you see in Nantucket or in Duxbury, that's what we want to see. We want it to blend, be part of it.
And when you talk about a cottage style community, are you talking about something that's more in terms of square footage and that sort of thing? What are you talking about?
We've looked at things that are as small as 600 square feet and as large as 2,500 square feet. And so one of the things, again, because we're not developers, we're not architects, we're sort of land managers. What we'd like to do is put out an RFP there with a good qualified developer who we've researched and who's got the experience and we've seen projects that are done in other towns. We can go and look, and say, all right, what, that would look in this town or it wouldn't. And so we want to be sure that the RFP is developed with enough latitude that the developer can go in there and be creative, but have, understand where the sides are, what the boundaries are that we find important. So that becomes important to us.
Right. Just from my own research on cottage housing, it just appears that you can get a lot for your money per acre, but also it would fit the needs of the community in terms of what people. Because we hear a lot on the committee that people are looking for cottage housing.
Right.
That's a great answer to people's downsizing. So, and I guess the one other question that I have is I just have, I guess, this image in my mind that the trustees just ride around the town and try to see an empty barn or an empty land or whatever. How is it that you find out that there's land available?
Yeah, well, I mean, some of it is exactly that. There's actually an inventory of what was called odd lots around town, with pieces that don't fit, the kind of the puzzle pieces. And one of our members has gone through that odd lot list. It's over 100 units, 100 locations, narrowed it down to 4. And we're in the process of, through a consultant, exploring whether or not those would fit with our particular need. So we're actively looking at that. We looked at another piece that was not far from the police station on Franklin Street, at the fire station, excuse me. And that was a great piece of land, but unfortunately it was landlocked, and so we couldn't get at it. So we'll explore, is there a possibility of getting access to it, but that was something that somebody, again, another member of the trust said, gee, I live on Franklin Street, that's something that I've been thinking of. We from time to time have people, members of the community will come up to us and say, hey, I've been thinking about this, or I saw that house and it's dilapidated, it's abandoned, or nobody's doing anything with it. Is that something you folks could do something with? There's a lot of that, but it is a little bit of catch as catch can.
Yes.
And there are lots of things going on with the trust and with this opportunity to do these things. And one of the things in our housing production plan that we've explored is the possibility of having a either part-time or full-time housing administrator. Somebody who could do a lot of things, including some of this research on locations, also looking at grants and other programs where funding might be available through the state or federal government. Housing and affordable housing is, as you know, a very current topic at both the national and the state level. So,
Right.
we think, and we've had some discussions in town about this idea of a housing administrator, and I think there's some support for that. Sometime in the next couple of years, it might be something that we could do. But to give us more teeth and more
Sure,
feet on the
sure.
ground, if
Right,
you will.
right. So that sounds like a goal for the future
Yeah,
for you.
yeah, that's in our plan. Yeah.
And especially with somebody who can look for grants as well as write them.
Right.
That's
Yep.
that's so
Yep.
important. That's so
Yep.
important. Tell me about because I hear this on our committee about. People think that there's a rundown or a dilapidated house that they drive by,
Yep, yep.
on their way to work or whatever it is. So, what are the steps in terms of what do you do about that?
Well, it's frankly, we've identified a lot like that. We'd obviously go to the town records and find out who owns it, and then find out what the circumstances are, and and frankly, call them up. Just do you own this property? Yes, I do. Well, do you have plans with it? And tell them who we are, and be very upfront about it. Say, we'd love to, see if there's a way here where you can sell it to us at frankly, a bargain price,
Right.
where we can do something with it and sell it to somebody else at a
Right.
bargain price.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So that is a realistic avenue for
Yeah,
people,
yeah.
rather than to just drive by and wonder what's going on.
Yeah,
But,
I mean, if somebody sees something, and that's frankly, one way that the public can be a big resource for us is, if they see something, let us know. Give
Right.
us a call.
Right.
Yeah.
That's okay. How about the accessory dwelling units? The legislature that was
Yep,
passed
yep.
this past summer. How will that fit in?
I
for
think
you?
that's that. Frankly, zoning is an opportunity for the town, and I know that the planning board and the zoning board are actively looking at different ways where the inclusionary zoning bylaw and the accessory dwelling units bylaws can be modified and broadly accepted in town. And I think, frankly, there probably are a lot of ADUs already in place.
Yes.
That may not.
Which we won't talk about.
We won't talk about.
yeah,
And
we're
I
not
don't know
gonna-
where
yeah,
they are,
yeah.
but there's probably some out there. But that's clearly an opportunity. And that's clearly a place where you can have that barn or the other outbuilding or however the law might be written, and accommodate the need for perhaps an elderly relative or a relative with needs, or sometimes just a relative who lives in a small place themselves.
right.
There are lots of issues surrounding that, including how they're financed and some of the laws that relate to how mortgages are put in place and whether or not the accessory dwelling unit has to be occupied by somebody who is a relative of the people who live in the main residence. All those things need to be ironed out, but
Right.
I think ADUs are a real opportunity.
Yeah. There's a great deal of interest, certainly for people that I have contact with at the senior center
Yeah,
in terms of how do we get there, explore that, and so I think one of the things that may happen with our committee is to almost come up with a manual that people can follow.
Sure.
What do I do first?
Yep.
Because it does seem it's almost a lifeline for a lot of people.
I think it is.
That could
Yeah,
certainly help.
yeah.
That could
And
certainly
I think once the zoning is put in place and hopefully passes in the spring, that a manual of sorts would be a truly a helpful resource for both the people who own the homes as well as the people who are looking for
Exactly.
opportunities. Yeah.
Right. Right. Right now, what's the biggest obstacle to the trust?
Well, I'd say the biggest obstacle is finding the land. And if we can find the land, we can find a way to find the money. We can find a developer to work with it. But the town has we have so much open space, and so much of it is constrained by either 1 acre zoning or it's already conservation land or other things. That it's really a needle in a haystack.
Right, right.
But it's something that needs to be done.
Yeah, and my understanding also is that there's a lot of there's so much wetland in Duxbury
Right,
also that
right.
compromises
Yep,
the
yep.
building on
Well, that's on
certain
the
things.
conservation side.
Yes.
We've had some opportunities to look at land in conjunction with the Conservation Commission, where some land, that is a bog or was a bog, it might be some uplands around that, and maybe there's an opportunity to acquire this, jointly with the Conservation Department, and then increase the conservation inventory at the same time we're increasing the land for the housing trust. So that's something we've
So
explored.
so you absolutely are collaborating
Right,
with a
absolutely,
number
yep.
of other
Yep.
town committees. What's an upland?
Upland is basically land you can build on. You think about it
Oh, okay.
as you're in an area that has, kind of dry land here, and then the bog might be off into the distance.
Oh, okay.
So you've got that setback from the bog. The land that you could build on is the upland.
Okay, okay. All of these definitions
Oh,
and
I
the
know,
new
they've
terms and the
lots of
new
terms,
terms.
yeah.
Okay. How can the Duxbury residents support the work that the trust is doing?
Yeah, I'd say there are two things. One is, again, as I said, if you see something, call us. If you see a piece of land, or if you have a need, let us know. We're always anxious to know more about what kind of land, people could have a need for. For instance, what kind of housing, rather. As an example, somebody mentioned autism at one of our meetings. We didn't think that was, we said, well, autism, I guess if you don't know somebody who's autistic, then you don't think about autism.
Right.
Well, we did some work, there's a group in Plymouth that has done a lot of work with autism. There's an incredible need.
Yes.
Veterans, again, unless you talk to the veterans agent, you don't know how many people there are out there that have that
Right.
need. If somebody has a type of need or a situation, let us know, because what we want to do is, we've got such a limited resource in terms of the land, we want to make sure we're using that land to meet the most
Right.
strident and stringent need.
Right.
So having that knowledge would be tremendously helpful. If you find a property, you see something, you've got a question, give us a call. We've got, we'll put plenty of miles on the car trying to find those things and trying to find those locations. And then lastly, I would say the way they can help is, hopefully the zoning bylaws amendments will pass, and that'll give us, a real tool. One of the things that comes out of the housing production plan is the zoning that we have right now is a real restriction.
Yes.
And a real impediment to the development of some of this,
Right.
for some of these properties. So,
Right.
so again, give us a call. If you see something, let us know, and then get out and vote. So
Right,
yeah.
right. So certainly I know one of the goals of the trust and the work in the production plan is education.
Right.
And that just seems even for the Housing Domain Committee, for
Right.
all of us to get up to
Right.
speed on this is, I mean,
Yeah.
housing IQ has raised by
Yeah,
many
well-
points, but there's so much information out there.
Yeah.
And I'm always thinking about how is it that we get this information
Right.
out to people. So education is a
Vital,
huge
right.
need.
And there are a lot of misperceptions about housing, and the misperception about affordable housing is that it's, I don't know, Section 8, that
Yes.
it's, that it's going to hurt my neighborhood,
Yeah.
or if you put an affordable house next to mine, it's going to decrease the value of my house or my
Right.
neighborhood. In fact, I live in a neighborhood of that has 10, we have 40 units, it's a condominium complex, 10 of which are affordable. And it's a great neighborhood,
Right.
and there's no distinction between my house or somebody else's house, and you don't get a perception that there's
Correct,
any
right.
diminution of value.
Right.
So I think that's a big issue, and then people, in a humorous way say, "Oh, affordable, Duxbury," contradiction in
I
terms. We're going to try and dispel that notion so that we can find a place for people with those needs to feel comfortable in our community.
That's interesting that you bring that up, because I think that's one of the things that we've discovered too, that sometimes people are uncomfortable sharing their need, their
Right.
concern. That there's, and not that there's shame in it, but there's something there that's keeping
Yeah.
them from
Yeah.
sharing it. So how can we work on that?
Yeah,
too?
yeah. Well, it's, somebody doesn't have to call up and say, gee, I have a need, I need this, but they can always call up and say, I'm an informed citizen, I know of this need, or, it doesn't have to be that I've got a rundown piece of property that I can't handle anymore. It could be,
Yes.
again, you drive by, I see this house all the time, well, what's going on
Right,
there? And,
right.
sometimes there are good reasons, and, sometimes, it's been left in a family and they've lost track of it. Or,
Sure.
it's kind of like the state treasurer's office, with the the lost
found
money.
money, yeah,
Found
I
money.
know. I love it.
Is there found real
Yeah.
estate? Who knows? I'd love to think so.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Well, Dan, thank you very much for coming in today and sharing so much information about the Housing Trust,
thank
because
you.
it is, It's almost a little secret, I think, in town with a
Yeah.
lot of people, especially people who may have recently moved here, or people may have lost sight of the work that you do. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
certainly appreciate your
Well, we
coming in.
appreciate your taking the time and
Okay.
appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. And if people do have, again, even just questions about what we do, just give us a call. The town's website has a list of all the participants
Yes.
and our contact information, and we welcome anybody's interest in questions.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay.
So this is Kathleen Dowling and Dan Coughlin at this interview, and we hope that we will be back to share more information about the housing needs in Duxbury. Thank you.